And Justin Dargin.
Thank you very much, Steve, for the wonderful introduction. I thank all of you for coming here and spending your time here. And hopefully we can have an evening which will be quite productive and interactive. And I think that will overall encourage and to increase our overall understanding of energy issues in the region, also globally. Now, our speaker today, Mark Carne, we are quite happy to have him. It's really a gift because he has worked for years on global energy issues and also specifically on Middle Eastern energy issues and natural gas. And he is Executive Vice President for Shell Upstream International, and he has a responsibility for the business in the Middle East and North Africa. And he's also a member of the Royal Dutch Shell's Upstream International Leadership Team. Mark was employed by Shell for over 20 years, until 2005. And his last role was being a managing director for the Brunei Shell Petroleum. He previously has held a number of commercial and general management roles in the UK and also the Netherlands. And Mark's first Middle East assignment was as an engineering manager of petroleum development in Oman from 1992 until 1996. In 2005, Mark joined BG's Group's Executive Committee as EVP and MD for the Europe and Central Asia region. And Mark also assumed his present position with Shell in September of 2010. And in terms of his educational background, Mark holds a BSc in Engineering Science from the University of Exeter, United Kingdom, and he's also a fellow of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. So we're quite pleased to have him today. And the topic today is something that's of immense concern. I mean, the issues that the world is facing in terms of sourcing energy for its future needs, as well as dealing with the risk of perhaps man-made climate change, is something which is concentrating many of the best minds that we have. So Mark is going to pose questions, and it might be a bit too ambitious for even us who have worked in the energy sector for a long time to at least develop answers, but the thing that we can do is that we can ask the right questions and hopefully we can see if we're in the right direction. So if we look back over the past few decades, we have seen that the world has been experiencing significant issues in terms of poverty alleviation in much of the developing world, and even providing many of these inhabitants of the developing world access to energy. And then we're also dealing with a very, very important issue of emerging markets. So emerging markets have been growing over the past few decades, and what is the key to this growth? The key to this growth has been energy, of course, and because without energy you can't have economic growth. So even in areas of the world where there's significant energy reserves, many of these countries have been finding that with their breakneck industrialization, there have been significant issues with allocation and production and supplying their industrial industries with enough energy to keep this forward momentum going. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about, in the Middle East, particularly in the Gulf, a region that has been experiencing just phenomenal economic growth annually. How is it going to fuel this growth, and how is it going to fuel this growth in a very sustainable manner? I mean, the region has prodigious natural gas reserves, prodigious oil reserves, and of course the oil reserves have been developed for many decades. But natural gas is something that's very new to the region, and the region hasn't really developed its natural gas reserves to the extent where it could be made sustainable and continuously drive economic growth forward. So Mark is going to touch upon all these issues, and he's also going to see that how can we meet our goals as a global community in terms of providing enough energy for economic development, but at the same time making certain that our environmental and climate goals are met. So I know this is a very ambitious topic tonight, but hopefully we can at least open up this box a bit and peer into it and at least begin to ask the right questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our man of honor tonight, Mark Carne. And please, Mark, if you can take the floor.
Thank
Thank you very much indeed, Justin, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by saying what a huge privilege it is to have a chance to speak to you today at the Dubai School of Government. The introduction that Justin just gave is, if I could answer even half of those questions, I think it would be an extraordinary achievement. So I'm not going to even pretend to do that. But what I do hope to be able to do is to raise some of the issues that face the world and the Middle East and the energy space. And I hope to set the scene for what I hope will be a good dialogue and discussion after my few comments. So really it's about the dialogue and the discussion and about sharing ideas today as much as it is about listening to me. But I want to just start off, if I may, with a few comments about some of the challenges that the globe faces, the world faces in terms of energy demand and in some of the other critical areas. So let me just start with some of the really raw facts and figures about the energy future going out to 2050 on a global scale. We're talking about a population which is going to be perhaps 2.5 billion more people in the world by 2050 than there is today. And then these people are going to be wealthier and they're going to need more energy. The global energy demand may be twice what it was, what it is today, perhaps even more. So the world is going to need twice as much energy, but we have to emit about half the amount of CO2 emissions that we do today.
To produce, but does it make sense for, let's say, Kuwait to import LNG instead of producing its own natural gas, or for Dubai instead of, let's say, the UAE producing its own? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is, I mean, it is clearly economically rational for these countries at the moment to be importing energy because it's considerably cheaper, as I said, to burn energy than to burn fuel. So it's an economically rational decision. But I think that you're quite right. I think there are many countries in the region that are on the, either today are considering it, or in the next few years will be considering importing energy. They do have their significant domestic gas resources. And I think one of the challenges is, how can you create a market, a supply side, that actually encourages this exploration and development of resources and recognizes that the gas prices you will have to pay for these sorts of exploration and development is substantially higher than the historical prices that existed in these domestic markets. But these prices actually can be dramatically lower than the cost of imported LNG. And so that, I think, is the trick. That I think people, I believe there is an opportunity for a lot more exploration of all gas in the region, and that would be economically attractive to do so. The thing is that this gas, there's a good reason why this gas has not been developed in the past, and that is that a lot of this gas that still has to be developed is either very deep or very sour, which means it's got contaminants in it like hydrogen sulfide or CO2. So it's very expensive and difficult from a technological perspective to develop. So it's, whereas the sort of historical oil fields have been relatively simple to develop in this part of the world, these sorts of deep gas reservoirs are much, much more technically challenging. And so, and that's why it takes many years to explore from them, appraise from them, and then develop. Which is why policymakers need to be thinking a decade out about supply and demand tightening and putting in place exploration and development policies today to match that demand tightening in decades' time.
Excellent, excellent. But just as a brief follow-up question, I don't want to move too much off topic, but there hasn't been a lot of focus, let's say, on the construction of the GCCIP, the Gulf Cooperation Council Interconnection Project, which, as we know, is the first pan-Gulf energy grid. And I think the implications of this are significant, not only in the sense of fostering Gulf cooperation between the various countries in the region, but also allowing the countries to experience some type of energy or nascent energy trade. So if most of the Gulf countries that are currently importing LNG are doing so for power generation, Do you think that once the GCCIP is up and running and then you have a pan-Gulf electricity grid, do you think it would even be necessary to import LNG at that point when, let's say, if Qatar has additional supply of electricity, that it could just export that to Kuwait as a need maybe?
Well, there's no doubt at all that the interconnection between LNG trade, domestic gas trade, and electricity flow across the region. You're absolutely right, they all come together in some shape or form. The fact is, of course, that historically the interconnection between these different countries, markets, has been very poor, both in the electricity sector and particularly in the gas pipeline area. So, I think there's a lot still to do. There's a great opportunity there. But I think the world of gas has also moved on, and it's now very easy to move gas directly to a power station, a local power station, form of energy, and to use that as the means of locally generating power. So there are, you will need to look at the overall economic and energy efficiency of the different solutions. But I don't think it's by any means obvious that necessarily an electricity grid would be better than local generation.
Also, you touched upon shale gas, and shale gas is absolutely a phenomenal development. I mean, of course, we've been hearing some very ambitious remarks out of the U.S. that the U.S. even may become an LNG exporter at some point in time. And of course, there's much interest in perhaps promoting shale gas development in Europe. But what we're starting to see now, at least in the U.S. context and also within Europe, is that there's a bit of pushback against this rapid shale gas expansion. And for instance, in the United States, there are significant environmental concerns that have been muted about whether there should be this just continuous growth in shale gas production. There have been issues with water contamination, contamination of underground aquifers, for instance, and environmental protection.